Here's what's coming up today on the Prove Me Wrong podcast. Fraley, he seemed to me like he was always on the edge of just completely losing it. It seemed like he was just barely on the edge of keeping it right. I mean, he was that loose to me.
I think he was.
You know,
I think you're dead on with
that's
that.
the impression I got. You know, listening to this, I'm like, oh my God, any moment he's just going to go and just be off the rails. Welcome, everybody, once again to the Prove Me Wrong podcast. It's the weekly podcast where you never know what you're going to get. Could be a conspiracy theory, could be a ghost story, could be an artist spotlight. Well, today we're going to get into music. I'm Pete Lieb. I will be your host as usual today as we introduce a new segment on the podcast called My Favorite Album. Now, there's a twist, of course. I'll never come straight at you. The twist is that we're going to take a classic artist or band with an extensive discography, and we are going to share our favorite album from that band. So, having said that, with me today is my co-pilot, my partner in crime, my pal, Dennis Miller. Hello, Dennis.
Hey, what's going on, Pete?
Full disclosure, though, this is not the Dennis Miller of Saturday Night Live and or Monday Night Football fame. We won't spend the next 20 minutes comparing the Green Bay Packer defensive line to the Spartan 300 guarding the hot gates of Thermopylae. But this Dennis is going to help us break down his favorite album from one of his favorite bands, Kiss. And I picked Dennis specifically, one, because of his vast knowledge of musical history, and two, because Kiss is one of his favorite bands. He's an aficionado of everything Kiss. I'm selling you up pretty hard here.
I don't know if that's entirely true, but
No,
I'll explain.
Well, I've heard your brother is a huge Kiss fan, right?
Yes,
And that's kind of how you got turned on?
He was, yes.
So let us in on that. Tell us about it.
My brother was 4 years older than I was, and he was born in 1967, so I was born in 1971, so he came on to Kiss. I don't really know how he came on to them, but found out about him and came across this record, and it was the first Kiss record, and from the second I actually have to say that I saw it before I heard it, and you didn't know whether they were clowns or what the deal was, but I just immediately was like, wow, I don't know what this is, if it scares me, if it,
I will say that if there is a better album cover for a first album, I've never seen it, I'll be honest. I'm exactly with you. Yeah. I don't know any kid who could look at that and think, what the hell am I looking at? What is that? Right. That was exactly the same impression I got the first time I ever saw it. So we're not going to disagree much. I'm a big Kiss fan also, so we're not going to disagree about our love for the band, but we will have just our own opinions of what the better album may have been from their, and they have, maybe 20 albums now?
Oh, gosh.
Going back from Kiss to Hotter Than Hell, then Dressed to Kill, Destroyer. They have peaks and valleys, right? Kind of like every band. Maybe they had that Dynasty thing there going on, music from the Elder.
Disco Kiss.
Yeah, right?
Right.
They came really into prominence with Alive, right?
I was young, very young, so it's really hard to say, but from all the history that I do know of them, I believe you're right. I think the Rock and Roll All Night track, the live track from Alive, is kind of what started them, really taking off, the takeoff point, because the first three records were as classic as they are now. I think they all sold less than 500,000 copies, which in the day was just not, nowadays it'd be wonderful. Any artist would be over the moon to sell that much, but back then it just wasn't. It was enough to keep them going,
right?
Until they had someone had the idea, and I should know this, being the aficionado that I'm supposed to be, but I remember who had the idea. I think it was Neil Bogart, the Casablanca owner, that said we should do a live record, and that's kind of what my remembrance of that was. But
well, it was interesting to me also because when I heard about how they made it, and it's about as live as most live albums are, that they'll have some pieces that are live, and then they'll have some pieces that they augment with some studio stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. That's kind of when they came into my orbit as well. It wasn't really before that. And we'll get into it again a little bit after I let you talk about your album. I'm going to let you go first. We'll get into how when I came into Kiss, and the album that I picked personally really is more personal, a feeling, just where you were at the time. And that's really all music is, or what it should be, in my opinion. if you can listen to music and not have some type of emotional response to it, you're a robot. You're an android.
Absolutely.
You don't have feelings.
I mean,
there's no heart there. There's just clockwork where the heart should be.
We're sitting kind of in the same seat we take the same position on that. I totally agree. I think we had a little conversation yesterday on the phone, and I just said, I used the word vibrate. With music, either it moves you or it doesn't, and I don't think there's anything that we can do about it. It does it for you or it doesn't. And that's probably another discussion altogether. But your job here today is going to keep me in line, roped in, because I have a really scrambled mind, and we'll turn down whatever road if you let me, but don't.
Well, then I'll keep the lasso handy.
Okay.
If I have to rope you in place. But okay, so out of these 20 albums, I'm assuming that Peter Criss's solo album is not your favorite album.
It is not.
Full disclosure, we've told each other what they are already.
Sure.
So that I could listen to yours and you could listen to mine. Tell the listeners out there, what did you pick?
Maybe, very unoriginal of me, but I picked the first one.
Okay.
Simply, I could have, and let me say, in full disclosure, I could have picked any of the first 6 studio.
Okay.
I do like Alive and Alive 2, but I'm personally just not a live record listener. It's not my thing.
Right, I agree.
I get it. I get why they do it, but it's not my thing. So yes, I picked the self-titled Kiss. To comment a little bit further on the cover, one of the interesting things to me is Peter's makeup on the first one. You'll notice that didn't do it himself. He had a makeup artist do his makeup that day, and they put that makeup on him, and
he looks kind of sleepy-eyed to me. He looks almost like a caricature of a cat, not that.
And his whiskers are all in parts, and he's got like red makeup. I'm not looking at it. I'm assuming you are.
Yes, I am.
So he's.
He almost looks like the underdog of Cat. I mean, meaning like the underdog cartoon. That dopey-eyed, sleepy-eyed.
Yeah, it's still very iconic. You can't miss it. Unfortunate to me that Kiss, in most of the things that you see, is the solo records. A lot of the merchandise, you see that. You see Destroyer quite a bit. Maybe some Love Gun. And my actual favorite cover is Dress to Kill, the one where they're dressed in suits. That's the one I really like the most as far as the cover goes. But let's talk about the first one. As I said earlier, my brother was the biggest Kiss fan that I know of. I know there's tons of them. They're the Army. That's what they're the Kiss Army. That's what they are. And there's a reason. But just classic tunes on there, just from Deuce. And
they're one of those bands that somehow, just to go back to they have somehow connected with their fans in a way that a lot of bands never do. The Rolling Stones, I don't think, have connected with their fan base the way that Kiss has. It's amazing. These people they'll have these enormous collections of gear, enormous collections of tchotchkes, and they'll have the coffin and the condoms and whatever else they happen to need. They've got it.
Right.
And it's kind of like a badge of pride that I have all of these Kiss items.
And my brother had so much of it. It would have blown your mind. To walk in his garage, he sealed the door and he had the magazines and every copy of any issued release that they had, whether it was on vinyl, 8 tracks, he had those. Cassettes, anything, magazines, posters from the 70s. He was more of he loved it all, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. Kiss could have farted on a record and he would have bought it and said it was the greatest thing. He was one of those guys that was always like, what's their best record? Well, what was the last one? Was it Revenge or Circus or Psycho Circus or whatever it was they were doing at the time? But
I liked Revenge, FYI.
Revenge was actually a good record.
It was a good record.
I didn't care for the track Domino that much, but other than that, I thought Unholy was a really cool song.
I was gonna hold off on this a little bit, but they have, to their credit, I think that they have really evolved from the first album onward. And I know that you were talking about the first one. When I listened to the first album, to me it almost sounded like Sweet, the band Sweet.
Sure. Yeah.
They had the
well, Fox on the Run sounds like an Ace Frehley tune.
Yeah, exactly.
It really does.
Exactly. They had kind of that
he actually
sound.
Covered it, as a matter of fact.
Very pop. Did not have that. What you think of Kiss later as being kind of the heavy metal, the hard rock. They did not have that sound at all in the first album. The harmonies were great. I thought the harmonies were great. I was surprised to see that the singles from that album were actually Nothing to Lose, Kiss in Time, and Strutter.
when Kissin' Time, Mistake.
Yeah.
That was actually a radio. The record label's promo. They did a kissing contest. For I don't remember if it was Guinness or not, but somebody was doing a contest, and this couple actually went on. Remember Mike Douglas, the talk show?
Yeah.
Well, Gene's got a very famous appearance on that show where he just acts like a total screwball, like he never did again. You have to watch it. That's another topic. But they had this contest, and that couple that won the contest, they kissed for I don't even know how long, just a really long time. So they had done that, and they won, and they were on with the band, and they performed, I think, Firehouse and something else. But it was so funny, the panel that was on with Gene, they were just really tearing him up. There was an old lady that was like a comic, and she's like, "You can't hide the hook." His nose.
Yeah.
It's like, wouldn't it be funny if you were just a good old Jewish boy?
I did see that. Okay, now that you say that, I have
okay.
seen that because she was riding him about being a good old Jewish boy.
Yep.
Yeah, and making fun of him. And he was trying to
right.
be coy about it, but she was calling him out.
If you only knew,
right? But that was interesting to me because the album has a lot of hits on it. I mean, it has a lot of historical hits, between Cold Gin and Deuce. But those songs were not the songs that were released at the time. They kind of, and that happens a lot actually, right? Sure. There's a lot of albums where the songs that have staying power are not the ones that the record company pushed in front of your face.
Sure.
So what else is there about that particular one that you like?
Gosh, so much. I really love 100,000 Years.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting, I already have said that I'm not a big fan of live records, but that particular song is an exception for me because there's a big drum solo in the middle of 100,000 Years that I think that was the track that Peter wanted a solo on the actual record and wanted to quit the band over and not including it in the record, but the record label's like, we're not going to put a 10-minute drum solo in the middle of...
Well, from what I've heard, Peter wanted to quit the band. He kind of used that as his weapon anytime he didn't get what he wanted.
Yeah.
I'm going to quit the band.
Yeah. I'm out of here.
Eventually, okay, right?
Sure.
You can only threaten it so much.
Yeah.
Well, when I listened to that, and the reason that I didn't pick that necessarily as my favorite album, to me that album sounded like, and again, I love the album, but it sounded like they were just right out of the garage. It was very loose sounding to me. The musicality of it was very loose sounding. If I'd been at a bar and hearing that band, I'd have thought, oh my God, this is fucking incredible. Yeah. That would have been the greatest thing I'd ever seen. But on an album, the production wasn't there.
Oh, it's raw. It's very raw. But that's actually...
and some people love that.
It's kind of something that they did... Kiss ended up doing so much that was produced as they went on through their lifespan that it's kind of cool to me that exists. Mm-hmm. Because that one's raw, and then Dressed to Kill, Hotter Than Hell was their second record, which is an absolute... It's got some great songs on it, but it's a production mess. It sounds terrible. And then they did Dressed to Kill, but... So the first one for me, it's definitely, I agree with you, it's not a good representation of what Kiss sounded like, even live. They were more bombastic and loud, and that, the guitar tones on there are real, very low gain.
Ace Frehley, he seemed to me like he was always on the edge of just completely losing it. It seemed like he was just barely on the edge of keeping it right. I mean, he was that loose to me.
I think he was. I think you're dead on with
That's
that.
the impression I got. Listening to this, I'm like, oh my God, any moment he's just going to go and just be off the rails. Yeah. So he was just always barely hanging on. It almost made me nervous listening to it. As weird as that sounds, it almost made me nervous to listen to him play.
It's like watching, Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel when I watch that show. I love it. But it's almost like, ooh, it's uncomfortable,
For sure.
Yeah.
So for me, the songs are obviously classic. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't by any stretch say that I'm not a fan of it. I certainly am. But to me, if I was picking one, I would have picked one more from, again, the feeling that I had, because I did not discover that
at the time. Yeah,
by any stretch. So my pick was more when Kiss found me, and that was 1983. I was 10 years old. MTV was essentially still brand new.
Sure.
You know what I'm talking about.
Years.
You know what I'm talking about. So I had never really seen Kiss much because the 5 years before that were songs from The Elder and the 5 or the 4 Unmasked and the 4 solo albums. lesser albums. I'm just going to put it that way.
Absolutely.
And so them drumming up that little bit of excitement when they pulled off the makeup, and I got caught up in that. I was like, wow, I was 10 years old.
But were you at least familiar with the faces, at least so you could be like,
I knew what the faces were.
Okay.
Yeah, you couldn't have been a kid in the 70s without at least seeing Kiss at what was it, the amusement park, or what was that album? What was that?
Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park.
Kiss Meets the Phantom, right? That movie.
Terrible train wreck of a movie that they made. Yeah,
exactly. So I actually did see that. So I knew them, but they were more. To your point, they weren't really musicians to me. I didn't really.
They were more like
see them.
superheroes or something.
Yeah, I didn't really see them that way. So when they were on MTV and they took the makeup off, and I kind of got a picture of who they really were and what they really looked like, that kind of stuck with me. And then that just coincided perfectly with, well, in reality, I guess "Lick It Up" was the second song, but
yeah, wasn't "All Hell's Breaking Loose"?
"All Hell's Breaking Loose" was the first song they released, but "Lick It Up" was the second one, and that's the one that hit me. And so my favorite album of Kiss is "Lick It Up," because, like I said, it assaulted me at the time and took me right back to my cousin and I. Literally, my cousin and I are standing on my cousin's bed with tennis rackets in hand, and right at that point where they do that little build up, woo, and and we're jumping off the bed and we're strumming our guitars, quote unquote, and we're feeling it. That's when it really meant something to me. And so everybody has that moment where, boom, okay, I've discovered this album or just this band, and then you're going to go back and you go forward with them at that point.
Sure.
So that was the genesis for me. But when you listen to that album versus anything that came before it, I think that was the second album with Eric Carr, right? And
Dynasty was Anton Fig.
Yeah,
not Peter Criss.
Peter Criss.
What was it?
Creatures of the Night.
Creatures of the Night.
Right. That was Eric Carr.
Yeah, I believe that was Eric. Yeah.
But the whole band sound changed when he came in.
Definite.
And you hear it immediately on Exciter, on Lick It Up. The first song is Exciter. And the difference and again, that's also Vinnie Vincent, and that was his, basically his first album with him as well.
I think he played in some parts of other ones.
Creatures of the Night too.
Yeah.
But his sensibilities were definitely different than Ace Frehley's. His playing was tighter than Ace Frehley's. His melodic expression was different. He did a lot of the writing on that album as well, and it showed. And so there wasn't a whole lot of filler to me in that album. Every song just kicked ass.
Yeah, going back through it, when you mentioned to me that "Lick It Up" was initially, I was like, gosh, I don't really have a ton of memories, but "All Hell Is Breaking Loose" came into my mind, and that was the first thing I also heard off that record. And when he went into that rap about who be this and who be that, it was a total turnoff. I thought they had a great chorus, but I just couldn't get on board with that. "Lick It Up," I did like that track. I was like, okay, this one's better. I think I did listen to it some back then, but it didn't. I was in a different place than that record. Like what we're talking about. It's where you are and what's on your plate at the time. So
I just kind of felt like when looking back at it, they just had something to prove at that album. They kind of felt like this is a crossroads here where we have to take off the makeup. We have to really get more focused on what we're doing in terms of the production value of the music. It's to me, it's significantly heavier and drives more. It's still Gene Simmons finding 6 ways to say that he's screwing people,
right.
Which just amazingly, I love almost every Gene Simmons song.
No, it's funny. It's just, but you're right. I was listening to, I don't remember the track title, but said something about shedding his skin as a snake.
Fits like a glove. Yeah. My snake is loose and it's ready to bite.
That's exactly right. So, it's
fits
always
like a glove.
Hey, Gene is what he is. He never has claimed not to be,
And when I heard the first album, to me, really, Paul was almost a backup singer in the first album. There weren't a whole lot of songs, at least in my mind. There was Strutter, but I think a lot of the other songs that were hits off that album, he really wasn't the singer on.
Right. Well, they shared more. Ace didn't come to the lead vocals until Love Gun, but Ace wrote Cold Gin.
Right.
And I think they wanted him to sing it initially, and he was like, "No, I don't want to do that." So he gave it to Gene. And Peter, Black Diamond, he has the intro, and then turns into Paul's vocal. It's interesting the way they did things. There are a couple things on there that I don't really love, but not to go backwards. But going to Look It Up and re-listening to it, I tried to listen to it twice through, which I pretty much did.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of energy that I've had forgotten about. It's very, they didn't hold back. They came in came at you, and it's that part of it's kind of cool. It's a lot of energy and it's raw and it's, there
wasn't one song. And I mean, maybe there was one song. I think it was "Give Me More." Maybe was the ones. Every band has kind of one song that's just filler, right? Okay, we have 7 songs. We need an 8th song. What are we going to do?
Right.
Oh, this is something I was working on. Okay, let's finish it. That was probably the closest one to that. Everything else, I thought, had a purpose. Again, even fits like a glove. It's ridiculous lyrics, but man, that song just drove all the way from start to finish. On the 8th Day, that's kind of their rock and roll anthem. That just goes right along with "You Can't Kill Rock and Roll" from Ozzy, or "Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution" from AC/DC, and "It's Only Rock and Roll, But I Like It." That's kind of their attempt to try to get some type of rock and roll anthem up there.
Other than "Rock and Roll All Night," of course.
Other than "Rock and Roll All Night,"
which may be the biggest, arguably the
it
biggest rock and roll anthem in the world. But
there you go. You're probably absolutely right.
Not for me.
No, that 1,000,000 to 1 to me is. You may feel completely different. I think it's one of the most underrated songs they've ever done. I liked it. 1,000,000 to 1.
In re-listening, I liked it.
That's a great, great song.
Well, Paul, man, that guy's got a voice, or he had. I don't know that he can do it anymore, but he had an amazing voice.
He was at the height of his power in that album. It was almost impossible to sing right then. I'm telling you, I've tried it. I've tried to sing some of those songs. They're almost impossible. Yeah. They're incredibly difficult to sing. You're right, though. He does not have that ability anymore. I mean, even that. I don't know. Have you gone to a lot of Kiss concerts?
I've only been to 2, and I didn't get to see them in their heyday. But I went with my brother in 1996 and saw them, and then I saw them later on an unmemorable show at all. But that one was
96. They were still
96.
That was what, Psycho Circus?
It was the reunion tour. I don't think they had put out anything since they had gotten back together. I don't think.
That was basically right around the time when they put the makeup back on too, right?
Yep.
And so that
was their 4 original guys.
Oh, okay. So they were trying to gain that relevance back. Somehow they have maintained that, or they maintained it for 40 years. Somehow. They do little gimmick here, little gimmick there, and they get themselves back in it. I think it was Gene who even suggested that Kiss really doesn't even need us. They have the characters,
it'll live on.
And putting that seed in your mind that it's okay that Peter Criss isn't here. It's okay that Ace Frehley's not here. It's okay that Eric Singer's playing the drums and it's
Tommy Thayer.
Tommy Thayer now, yeah. Tommy Thayer's playing the guitar. It's okay that they're wearing the makeup. Yeah. This is the character. It doesn't matter who wears the makeup. Sure. What do you think about? They're not individual people. There's just those 4 characters.
No, I mean, I'm not a hater of it by any means. They were just here not too long ago. I didn't choose to go see it. And it's not because I hate it or I'm against it. I think the original idea is, mostly behind us. The self-proclaimed greatest band in the world, and maybe they were at one point. And maybe they are. I don't know. It's not for me to say, but...
Well, I mean, I agree with you. It really comes down to personal choice. If somebody wants to go and see what's essentially a tribute band, you're wearing the makeup, and it's endorsed by Kiss. This is our endorsed band. There are other cover bands that are endorsed by the actual band.
Sure.
It wouldn't be unheard of. If you want to go and see it, go and see it.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with the fact that it's not the actual band, there aren't a whole lot of those guys left, period, in life. No. And we talked about this the other day. You go to see Foreigner, there's one guy.
Right.
And he's not even playing.
Sometimes.
He's not even the full-time player, right. So it's happening. These guys are aging out, unfortunately. All those rock heroes of the 80s, they're
to
aging.
The best of us.
For sure.
It's going to happen. So,
which leads me to a whole different conversation as to whether or not, who's going to be left for us? Who's left for us?
Right.
Do you just stop going to concerts at some point? Because, the worthwhile acts are gone.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to throw in there is one thing I would love to see, because I know that these 2 things are possible. I don't know about... I know Ace has a daughter, but I know Paul and Gene both have sons that are talented guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they want to have anything to do with portraying their fathers, but personally, I think it would be cool.
Why not?
Yeah, who better to do it than them? But, that's probably not going to happen if it hasn't happened yet. But I know that both of their sons sing and play, so I know it's in the realm of possibility, maybe.
For sure. So, just to take it back real quick, I'm listening to that first album.
Sure.
I think they had a little bit of everything there. I don't think they were quite sure of who they were. They definitely had the look, they had the shtick, they had the machismo, they had the attitude.
Yeah, they had that for sure.
But as they went on, then they started really getting, okay, we're starting to get into what our identity is.
Sure.
As well.
I think a lot of bands do that, though.
Sure.
It's a starting place. But, to expand on what you're saying, with the first Kiss record, it wasn't really all Kiss material. A lot of it came from a band called Wicked Lester, which was a previous band that Paul and Gene were in with other guys. And I think there's other writers involved as well. So those are a few things, yeah. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Bands start somewhere and they morph in different ways, find who they are, lose who they are, find it again maybe. and
at least they had the ability to maintain. Some bands, Pearl Jam in my mind is that band. They come out with that opus on their first album and then they could never get close to it after that.
Right.
So some bands are that. They hit that boom, that first album. They've had this material for 7 years and they could do nothing after. They couldn't back it up. I think that Kiss was different than that. I recommend to everybody because normally when you catch something, an artist midstream, like I did, 1983, they were already out for 10 years at that point.
Yep.
And you catch what they're doing now and you're like, wow, this is the greatest thing. And then you start to go back and investigate what they did previously. A lot of times all you get were the hits. A lot of times all you get are the greatest hits albums. All I hear is, I Was Made for Loving You and Love Gun and Rock and Roll All Night, Detroit Rock City.
Which is a great track.
Oh, sure. But that's all you hear. So unless you have the time or take the time to actually get the full album and listen to the full album, you'll miss some of the other songs that were lesser tracks at the time. Even like Nothing to Lose. That's a great track. I like it a lot. Yeah. And it was a release, but it is not one of their historical hits. Nobody's putting that on the top 10 list.
You know where they played that song? Unbelievably, is they played. Remember when they did Unplugged when they reunited? Mm-hmm. They played Nothing to Lose that night, which was. I was kind of scratching my head, going, "Why did they do that?" But it was cool. It worked because I think it was the four original guys and Eric Singer and at the time Bruce Kulick. I think they all played that one together,
right?
Which was cool because Peter sings in that one, and they kind of all took some liberties with the vocals and stuff like that. So it was neat. But if I have to be honest, that's not my favorite track on the record. But it's
again, that's when you really see the difference in what the band was then versus what they became later. That's all that really jumped out at me is, wow, they have this hard rock look. They don't have that hard rock sound. But maybe it didn't exist in 1973. Maybe it wasn't really there.
Well, Sabbath was around, so that darkness was.
Yeah.
You got Deep Purple and. I don't know. It's hard for us because we didn't, we were around, but we weren't around. No. We were too young to.
For sure.
So that's kind of what brought rock and roll on my radar. I think mainly. My parents weren't rock and roll listeners. It was Harry Chapin and stuff like that, which is great too. But my brother came across Kiss. I don't know how, but.
Thank God for older siblings or older cousins.
Oh, yeah, man.
I was the same way. The only reason I learned AC/DC or Queen or even the James Gang or Kiss was all because I had older cousins. I had cousins that were 5 and 6 years older than me, and I would come in and they'd be listening to, Queen, and I'm like, what the hell is this? What am I listening to? Yeah. It's a sonic revolution. I remember the first time I was sitting there with my cousins at 13, and he put on a record because that's what we had.
Yep,
and I heard this, boom, 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 running with the devil. And I looked at him in my eyes, and I looked at him like, what am I listening to? And it's the most amazing thing in the world. You have those epiphanies, especially as a kid. If music turns you on, you either have it or you don't.
Definitely.
You have to, at that point, if you like it, take that time and go back and actually go into the albums and listen to the albums. Because back then, the albums were really, really important. It wasn't about making singles and putting singles on iTunes and selling the single, and the album doesn't matter anymore. That's when they were trying to make every song worth it.
Yeah. So you were talking about Van Halen. So I'm going to wrap Van Halen back around to Kiss. Gene Simmons tried to sign Van Halen. And he has demos of Alex and Eddie playing some songs that ended up on Love Gun.
Well, didn't Gene Simmons also sign or try to sign like Skid Row? Wasn't he also involved?
I don't really know on that. Maybe.
He was very involved in...
Well, do you remember not that they're that memorable, there was a Japanese band called EZO, I think Gene had something to do with back then, and he was doing some production. And maybe he was involved in Black and Blue. Do you remember? Because that's where Tommy Thayer came from. And Tommy Thayer actually was a road manager for Kiss in the reunion years and had a lot to do with a book that they came out with, which was called Kisstory, which my brother had. Mm-hmm. He put that together, and that's one of the reasons that he kind of ended up playing guitar for them, because there was a gig in California where Ace was running late, and they had a backup suit for Tommy in case because Ace was going through it, as he often was at the time.
Right.
I guess Tommy was suited up, makeup, the whole kit and caboodle. He was ready to go, and Ace showed up at the last second and played the show. But
have you listened to Paul Stanley's
book?
memoir?
Oh, yeah.
How did you like that? What did you think of that?
I think the content was good. It's more interesting if you listen to it on Facebook, listen to him read it.
I did. I listened to everything on Facebook.
Absolutely uses every cliche that there ever was. So from that standpoint of it, it's hilarious.
Right.
But he tells some great stories about his childhood and his hearing. He only has hearing on one side.
I did not know that until those audio tapes. Sure. I did not know that was the case.
There's some definite...
I cannot imagine... Because we talked about him being really amazing. He was an incredible singer. He had an incredible voice. I can't imagine doing that with one ear and not having that ability to hear from the other side or know what's going on over there.
Life in mono.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know.
I mean, it's hard enough for people to sing with two good ears. I mean, really. So for him to be able to do that with one, it's really stunning. I did not know that until I heard that on YouTube. I was, 45 years old when I found that out. It was amazing. But I loved it just from the standpoint that I just love hearing these guys kind of snipping at each other, and I love that. I love when they do these tell-alls, and we're gonna bring out all the dirty laundry, and they snip back and forth at each other just so matter of factly.
And it's very much if you haven't gone to the other three, you should read them too, because some things align, like with the way they tell their stories, and some don't. Of course, they're not going to remember every single thing, but for the most part, they pretty much have some of the same stories, from different angles, of course. But, but they definitely were characters.
I find myself absorbing just an enormous amount of rock and roll documentaries. I don't know if you do.
Oh, yeah.
Hulu has, I think it's Hulu, or Prime Movies, whatever. I have time on my hands. I'm watching somebody's documentary.
Same.
I just love it.
I'll recommend one to you. One of my favorite artists, Butch Walker. It's called Out of Focus.
Okay.
It's on Amazon. The guy's a genius. He's won Producer of the Year. He's not as much known for his own music as he is for production. He's done Pink, and the list is way too long. But he started producing records in the early 2000s and just blew up doing it. The songwriter too. I mean, just Avril Lavigne, Fall Out Boy. The list just goes on and on. But you should check him out. I think he's up your alley, and it's an interesting documentary. Why they did it, I'm not exactly sure, because he's more known as a producer than an artist, but he does have, he's a guy that has a rabid fan base.
So, once again, this has been my favorite album. We've done Kiss this week, this episode. Dennis has decided that the original album, Kiss, with the best cover in history, in my opinion, again.
Yeah.
One of the best covers ever.
Sure.
I mean, there's never been a 10-year-old child who ever walked into a record store. Well, unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of 10-year-old children walking into record stores, period, now. But if there was one thing I could give back, I'm going to go on a rant. If there's one thing that I could give back, there's one piece of technology that was better then than now, it is the vinyl record. And you cannot convince me otherwise.
I collect them, man. You're preaching to the choir.
You cannot convince me that CDs are better, that MP3s are better. They're better in terms of storage space, but there was nothing.
Everything right here.
Yeah, exactly. But there is nothing better. I mean, I remember being a kid, and you get these albums, and the act of opening them, reading the liner, pulling out the liners, looking at the pictures in between, looking at the stuff that they give you in there, that was almost as much fun as listening to the record.
Absolutely.
And all that's gone. That tactile.
And who did that better than Kiss?
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe the Beatles. I don't know, but
no, maybe. But Kiss was.
But yes, yeah. But I mean that's lost. All of that. Those things were works of art. It wasn't just here's some music on an MP3
Sure.
for you to listen to. It was the whole sensation. You're pulling this record out, you're cleaning it off, you're looking at it, making sure it's not too warped or scratched. You're putting it on the record player, and then you're looking at the inside of the album, or you're looking at the photographs, or you're reading the lyrics that they put in there. Man.
And you had to wonder.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have a website or a Facebook
Right.
or an Instagram, whatever it is. People, I'm not a huge social media. I watch YouTube constantly. Don't get me wrong when I
Right.
say that but I'm not into Snap this and Insta that. It's not what I spend my time doing. But I feel bad that way for the youth, for the young people. It's like they don't have to wonder about anything. If they want to know
Right.
what something is, click, 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 boom. They know your whole backstory pretty much, within a couple minutes. All right, I got that. I don't have to wonder about that anymore.
Well, there's no mystery, right?
Right.
Half of the appeal of KISS was the mystery.
Yep.
Who were these guys? Who are they?
Yeah.
All you ever see of them is them in the makeup.
Yep.
The only content you could ever digest was them in the makeup. You never got to see anything else. To your point now, they would be everywhere. They'd be on Instagram. They'd be on numerous websites. They'd have their own Facebook page individually, showing themselves their Pomeranian dog eating a steak. Just stuff that just completely kills the myth.
Sure.
I don't know. A huge piece of their popularity and their career was the myth. The stage presence and who are these guys? They're putting their own blood in comic ink.
Yep.
Just doing really weird things, really off-the-wall things that other bands weren't doing. It's hard for me to believe that you'll have anything like that going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And the bad side of that for KISS was, and people still to this day discount their music, and I think that's wrong, in my opinion.
I agree.
KISS gets discounted as they're no talent clowns, and they're not.
They're no talent clowns, but Nirvana are some type of incredible music. They played 4 chords. It was all, and they were all power chords at that. Yeah. Music is music. How does it make you feel?
Exactly.
Whether or not somebody is technically superior.
Yeah, there's no Steve Vai or Yngwie Malmsteen or anything in their band. But
right.
Who cares?
Not every band can be Rush, and even Rush. Sometimes you get to the point where there's that diminishing returns. Yeah. You're so damn good that nobody can appreciate it anymore. Yeah. We don't appreciate that. It gets so much that our brains can't handle it. And then, we have to bring it down.
It's true. I mean, even me, I love Rush. I think they're talented,
for sure.
But 3 songs and I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm filled. I'm good. It's like, all right.
It's a mental workout. It's like running laps. Whereas
it's not AC/DC.
No doubt. Whereas I throw AC/DC or I throw Lick It Up in the player,
sure.
And it's like sitting on the beach. Yep. There's no thinking involved. There's just feeling and getting fired up and getting pumped up and enjoying it. Okay. Well, once again, this was our favorite album. The band was KISS. We will do this again. There are a lot of incredible artists out there. You want to go Van Halen next?
Yeah.
You want to go Van Halen?
Of course.
So our next, my favorite album will be Van Halen. Keep on the lookout for that. If you like what you've heard with this podcast, you can drop us a line on Facebook. We have a Prove Me Wrong podcast Facebook page. You can also find us on Instagram. You can also send us a note on email. We have provemerongcast@gmail.com. If you like this episode, you want to hear more, you can find us on TuneIn, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, podcast app, anywhere where you can find podcasts, you can find Prove Me Wrong. This episode of Prove Me Wrong podcast is brought to you by Zendozone's Citronella Burners from JT Eaton. Listen, I live in Florida. The bugs here are big enough to steal the rent check, and a citronella candle is essential to my back patio. How do I bring Zen to my outdoor zones? Zendozones. They're shaped like fearless little tiki gods, and let Surfin' Stan, Hawaiian Howie, and Luau Lily bring the islands to your backyard with Zendozone Citronella Burners. Zendozones uses natural 3% citronella candles and incense cones, perfect for patios, decks, backyards, campsites, poolside, and more. Enjoy the outdoors again. So get Zendozones. They're available now on Amazon and at Ace Hardware. Collect them all today. So, any other final thoughts, Dennis?
Appreciate you having me, man. Fun.
No problem. We'll absolutely do it again.
Good conversation.
Yeah. And for the Prove Me Wrong podcast, once again, I'm Pete Lieb and my buddy D Mill over here. And we'll talk to you again soon.